Hello and welcome. Let's talk about Chapter 7 and 8 of The Mandalorian. As always, I'm going to start with a completely spoiler section. I'm going to talk about just about everything from the episode, at least at a high level, quick overview. If you don't want any spoilers, go ahead and skip to this timestamp right around here somewhere. And for everyone else, we are going to go over the spoiler section right now. Again, if you don't want spoilers, even though I'm coming at this quite late, skip to this timestamp. And after that, we'll talk about the bad things of the two episodes. We'll talk about my nitpicky things, my neutral things, and then wrap this all up with good things and kind of my impression of the series overall. So, here we go. Last chance to get away if you don't want this ruined. Chapter 7 starts off with Avery receiving a message from the Guildmaster saying that the leader they were in has been completely taken over by incels. Now, he's willing to call everything even with Avery if he'll just come and help him overthrow the incel leader. However, knowing this might be a trap, Avery enlists the help of Mrs. Aragorn. And after Theo almost kills both of them by grabbing onto the ship's controls when they weren't around, he also goes to enlist the Ugnaught creature, someone we later find out is named Quill, and along with Quill, he ends up enlisting the bounty hunter droid from the first episode, who's now been reprogrammed to be a general helper and will be serving as Theo's nanny. We also find out during the scene that Mrs. Aragorn was a rebel shock trooper. I did not know that was a thing, so neat. After meeting up with the Guildmaster, they set up camp for the night and are attacked by some pterodactyls. The Guildmaster is poisoned by one of them, and is about to die when Theo uses the Force to heal him. Touched by this incredible act of kindness, the Guildmaster turns on the two bounty hunters he had with him and confesses that the whole thing was a trap to kill Avery and capture Theo. They decide to spring the trap. Quill and Theo head back to the ship while Mrs. Aragorn and the Guildmaster head to the client with the empty bassinet claiming to have captured Avery. They find the town is crawling with incels. Avery is handed over to General Rommel and things are looking grim, but suddenly Snidely Whiplash calls General Rommel and guns them down. Avery makes a distress call to Quill, which is unfortunately intercepted by officers Ponch and Baker, who head out on their bikes to arrest Quill. Moff Whiplash makes a grand entrance in a TIE fighter as the building is completely surrounded by stormtroopers. Whiplash begins monologuing about how he wants Theo. Ew. Avery keeps calling for Quill, but we see that Baker and Ponch shot him just before he got on the ship, and Theo is now safely in their custody. Chapter 8 begins with a 5-minute long joke featuring on officers Ponch and Baker. Thankfully, the worst scene in this series is brought to an abrupt end with the Hunter droid showing up and killing them both. Moff Whiplash sets up a giant cannon instead of just storming the building with his hordes of stormtroopers and continues monologuing at them the whole time, as he reveals the names of everyone in the building. Oh yeah, Avery's name is actually Din Djarin, but I'm sticking with Avery. We get an exposition dump that doesn't serve to tell us anything new, it's just some long cuts of the flashback scenes we've already seen up to now. Avery's parents were killed by battle droids. He was rescued by a Mandalorian. Maybe Boba Fett? It's hard to tell. They build up the moment like it's supposed to be Fett, but then you see a whole squad of Mandalorians who look all alike, so maybe not. And in the end, he joins the Mandalorian Creed. The Hunter droid shows up and begins wiping out stormtroopers with Theo strapped to his chest in a papoose carrier. We get a fun action scene, ending with Moff Whiplash beating Avery and everyone retreating back into the building they were just in. The Hunter droid cuts open a grate into the sewer system, but Avery is badly wounded. He needs treatment that would require his helmet to be removed, and he would rather die. Meanwhile, we get a flamethrower trooper, now on sale wherever Disney products can be found. He's about to incinerate them all to a crisp when Theo makes a dramatic stand and forces the flames back onto the trooper, completely turning him to dust. With the grating to the sewer system removed, man, I really hope that's a rain sewer system and not a sanitary sewer system. The Hunter droid stays behind with Avery while everyone else makes a run for it. The Hunter droid goes to remove Avery's helmet and Avery pulls his gun on him, saying he'll kill him if the droid removes his helmet, that nothing living can see his face. To which the droid replies, "It's a good thing I'm not a living being then," and treats Avery with some Bacta spray. They navigate the sewer system, eventually making their way back to the Mandalorian Enclave where they find a pile of Mandalorian helmets. Mother Abbas is there melting down equipment and explains that the Imperials showed up and killed them all. She then tasks Avery with finding the planet full of people like Theo, and gives Avery the symbol of the Mudhorn, stating that he and Theo are now a clan of two. As one final gift, Mother Abbas gives Avery a jetpack, warning him that it will not listen to his commands until he properly learns it. The party boards a barge floating on a... I can't believe I'm about to have to read this. Floating on a river of lava. There's a troop of troopers at the end of the lava river, and the hunter droid sacrifices himself so that Avery and Theo can get away safely. Moff Whiplash shows up in his TIE fighter, prompting Avery to take to the skies. Since the jetpack won't listen to his commands, all he can do is go straight up a small ways. But Avery uses this to grapple onto the ship and plant some of the hockey puck explosives onto the TIE fighter, blowing it up. Mrs. Aragorn stays with the Guildmaster, Avery says goodbye and leaves with Theo to find his people, and Moff Whiplash makes a dramatic reveal standing atop his TIE fighter with a dark saber. Okay, so that wraps up my main spoiler section. I will do light spoilers, I'm sure, as we discuss some of the things in the episode, but all my major spoilers are done. Let's start off by talking about the bad things. Chapter 7 doubles down on the Force healing power introduced in The Rise of Skywalker. I guess technically it was introduced here in The Mandalorian, since this came out the day before, since Chapter 7 came out the day before The Rise of Skywalker. And I have mixed feelings about the Force healing. I've seen it in plenty of the Star Wars video games, so it's not a new power per se, but it makes sense in a video game as a useful game mechanic. In the larger Star Wars universe, it makes less sense. And it makes even less sense that the use of this power would actually rob you of your life. It came off as a cheap gimmick so Abrams could have his cake and eat it too at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, and it's not something I enjoyed seeing in The Mandalorian. Especially when you stop to think about how completely this would ruin previous Star Wars. Why didn't Anakin just save his mom using the Force when he found her? Why didn't Anakin save Padme when he found out that she was going to die in childbirth with Force healing? There's just so many moments in Star Wars up to now that they could have used the Force healing to save people, and just for whatever reason said, nope, not going to do it, when it turns out it's a pretty basic Force power. I mean, the fact that Theo, for his species, young creature, can use it right off the bat, it makes no sense. The introduction of the Force healing makes no sense, and I really didn't like seeing it in The Mandalorian. We're introduced to a new main bad guy. Moff Gideon, someone I'm calling Snidely Whiplash, or Moff Whiplash, makes no sense in these chapters. I'm assuming that he's being set up to be the main villain in Season 2, and that they just wanted someone to replace General Rommel for some reason, but everything about him makes no sense. He is the textbook definition of a bad, evil boss. He murders his second-in-command for a minor slight. He monologues to the good guys repeatedly. He has extremely incompetent minions, and during his first interaction on the screen, he somehow knows Theo isn't in the bassinet. But we're never told how on Dagobah he figured that one out. Except maybe he didn't figure it out? As Chapter 8 begins, we get some exposition about how the only reason Whiplash hasn't blown the door down and is giving them an unearthly amount of time to make up their minds is because he thinks that they still have Theo. Except if he still thinks they have Theo, then why did Whiplash question General Rommel to check again when Rommel claimed to have Theo? And if Whiplash did think Theo was in there, why would he open fire into the place he thought Theo was in? The way Whiplash is brought in just makes no sense. They've done such a good job in the series so far that when something so boneheaded like this happens, something that is just so obviously them railroading the plot for a cool line they want a character to say, or a cool scene, but they don't know how to actually make the story go that way, it sticks out like a sore thumb. One other really bad thing that happened in these two episodes was that Chapter 8 starts off with a 5-minute waste of time that I would have expected to see in something like Robot Chicken, but not as a filler in what has so far been a great series. In it, these two stormtroopers, people I've been calling Officers Ponch and Baker, discuss the hardships of being a stormtrooper and how Imperial leaders like to kill them just to show how tough they are. They then try to shoot a stationary object a few feet from them and miss repeatedly, like they never hit it. So what? They're a big enough threat that they can hit a moving target from a long way away with a single blaster shot while zooming around on their speeders, but they can't hit a stationary object just a few feet from them while they're not moving? Look, I get it. It's supposed to be a meta joke about how stormtroopers are bad shots, except, as we've said earlier, Stormtroopers aren't bad shots. In universe, they are excellent shots. Stop breaking the fourth wall and get on with the chapter. So that's my bad things. Let's talk about just kind of my nitpicky things I found in this episode. Some things were really, really, really nitpicky for me. Like there were a couple scenes where just there was some continuity errors. Like at the beginning of chapter 7, when Avery goes off to enlist Mrs. Aragorn, they have some credits sitting on the table, and between shots, they are either mostly neatly stacked up or they're just sprayed out across the table in general. And the fact they kept switching between these two, it's one of those things that you shouldn't notice, but like I immediately lock onto. So that was an extremely nitpicky thing. One of the other nitpicky things is at one point Avery makes a call to Quill and is overheard by 2 incels on speeder bikes. These are officers Baker and Punch. This moment bugged me for a couple of reasons. First off, how did they intercept the call? All we see is that Avery talks into a comm device, and then only these 2 stormtroopers hear it over their headset for some reason. Up until now, comms have been pretty secure in the Star Wars universe. Second, out of all the incels, how is it only that these 2 heard the call? Look, I know that ultimately the answer is they heard it so a scene could happen, and only they heard it so that a different scene could happen. But within the context of the film, it makes no sense and it irked me. When the scene ends with Ponch and Baker at the beginning of Chapter 8, we see a scene that is obviously CGI. And it is painfully Attack of the Clones obvious we just went full CGI. I know why they had to do it. But honestly, this nitpick is more of a testament to how well the entire rest of the series has done their CGI effects. The fact that this one brief moment even, made me go, ooh, obvious CGI, instead of, I'm pretty sure that was CGI, but I'm not 100% certain, is a testament to the hard work they put into the series. In the big showdown fight that happens in one of the episodes, there is a moment that comes straight out of one of the Anti-Trekkers' super chats. Avery is shooting a repeating cannon, and even though he's missing all of them with his shots, the stormtroopers are such red shirts that they still die. And another nitpicky moment is at the end of this fight, Avery and his company have to retreat back into the building they were just in, and Snidely Whiplash gives the order to burn them out. Why would he give this order? He definitely knows Theo is in there now. But more importantly, a group of troopers blew the back door off during the fight. This isn't a secure position, but everyone is acting like it is. I could see Moff Whiplash not knowing something a squad member did. Maybe. But Mrs. Aragorn and the rest of the team should be acutely aware of the giant hole in the wall next to them. Later on, the gang goes riding down a river of molten lava. It's not as egregious as the Revenge of the Sith, but that kind of hot lava that is bubbling and flowing fairly quickly is in fact quite hot to stand next to, or be in a car with the windows up 10 meters away from. Maybe some people should be just a little more uncomfortable than they are right now. Like everyone is still pristine and not sweating at all. There should be, ouch, this hurt. This is kind of giving me a little burn right now because of the intense heat. Like I'm standing too close to a bonfire, a giant bonfire. But nope, nothing like that. One last nitpicky moment is during his last interaction with Mother Abbess. Avery is given a jetpack, but warned that the device will not listen to his commands until he has fully learned how to use it. At first, I thought this was a really cool thing to throw into the end of the season. That over the course of Season 2, we will see Avery learning to master this. But then, Avery turns around and uses it. Twice. Now, the first time, I was willing to give it a pass. All he did was go straight up in the air, and that was kind of shaky. So maybe that's all he could do at this point in time. But then, after the battle, and saying his goodbyes, he flies off to his ship with a jetpack. What was even the point of saying he couldn't use it if you're going to have him immediately use it? Why not just say, like, you've earned your mark and therefore the privilege to use this? Instead, it's just a bad writing moment where Avery can do everything without proper training. So that's the end of my nitpicky things. Let's talk about the neutral things. Things that just hit me and made me go, meh. For example, there was a line in Chapter 7 made by General Rommel that I felt like may have been a dig at the current administration. He said that the Empire makes everything it touches better, as judged by any metric: safety, prosperity, trade opportunity, peace. It came off as a dig because I've heard many people who do support the current administration as citing these exact examples for why they support him. And I'm just tired of the overt references to current politics being in Star Wars. But at the same time, I don't know this was supposed to be a direct reference. Maybe it's just a coincidence. So it ended up being kind of a neutral thing. One of my other neutral things was Chapter 8 finally shows us the full flashback of the death of Avery, his adoption into the Mandalorian culture, all that. The scene itself is very well shot, but it didn't really provide us with any new information. All of this had been shown before, so getting the full take now ends up bogging down the pacing of the episode. And honestly, that's how I would describe these last 2 chapters of The Mandalorian. They were bogged down. While The Mandalorian has not been a high-octane adventure, it also hasn't felt dull. These last 2 chapters were just a chore to get through. Now, yeah, to be fair, it probably didn't help anything that I'm 2 weeks behind on reviewing these, so my motivation for doing it was low as it was, but even still, they were just a chore to watch. They weren't really fun episodes to watch for me. I don't think that they had enough material for 2 chapters, so they threw in a bunch of filler and slowed down the pace to really stretch it out into these 2 chapters. The last thing that was mad to me is that it didn't end the way I hoped it would. At the end of Chapter 7, with Theo in the custody of Punch and Baker, I thought we'd finally get the big showdown moment that I'd been expecting since, episode 3, I think it was? Just a moment where Avery uses all of his gadgets. A moment where we get to see how much Avery has grown as a person over the course of the season, and we didn't get that. We had a chance for him to use all his weapons, to really just showcase everything in this big battle, but instead, he grabs a laser cannon and goes all Rambo on them. It was a missed moment scene that made me sad they didn't take the build-up that they'd been leading up into. But it's not like the route they took really ruined the show either, so it just ended up being a meh thing for me. Okay, so that's my bad things I saw, my nitpicky things, and my meh things. Let's talk about the good things that were in this episode. I really liked how they gave a more plausible reason for the mystery surrounding Luke than what we get in The Force Awakens. It's really bugged me for a long time that Rey treats the story of Luke and Han and Leia as a huge legend, even though it's been maybe 30 years since the fall of the Empire. There's a scene in this chapter where they talk about the legend, and it's not necessarily a legend about, Luke existing at all, but it's a legend about the Jedi and all the powers the Jedi's had. And that makes a lot of sense. After the fall of the Jedi Order and the Revenge of the Sith, there were basically 2 Force users in the entire universe, considering that Yoda and Obi-Wan were hiding, and Luke and Leia had no connection to the Force yet. Then, by the time we get to The Last Jedi, Luke is only 53 years old. So it's a half century between these 2 events. That's 2 generations, maybe 2 generations. 53 years is a lot of time for the supernatural powers of the Jedi and Sith to fall away into myth. And having this scene discussing the rumor of the Jedi and the powers they have, taking place immediately following the events of the Return of the Jedi, makes the scene that happens in The Force Awakens have even more sense. Because let's face it, even at the beginning of The Phantom Menace, the Jedi were not a huge presence in the galaxy. Like, people knew about them. They showed up on the trader ship, and they knew the Jedi were bad news. But it's not like everyone talked about the powers and stuff they had. It was just the Jedi themselves. So the fact they could do these amazing things, move things with their minds, choke people with their hands, it makes a lot of sense that has become such myth and legend. So that was a really good scene in the show that I really liked. Another good thing is, at the end of Chapter 7, we're given a sad and wistful version of the usual upbeat Mandalorian ending song. It fits the moment so well, and it was just a lovely piece of music. I really enjoyed it. One other good thing, we get to see Avery's face at one point in these last 2 chapters, and it is indeed Pedro Pascal. Now, I've said it in a previous review, and I stand by that today, but uh, since they've created a good lead character who struggled and grew throughout this season, I didn't care if it was a boy or a girl under the mask whenever the reveal happened. But I am very glad that it was Pedro under the helmet and that they weren't just using his voice. Because if they'd gone that route, I felt like what they were ultimately saying is that they thought Star Wars fans were too sexist to accept a female character under the mask from the very start of things. So they had to sneak it in on us. I think that little things like this, and some of the moments we got in The Rise of Skywalker, show some promise that studio execs are realizing that it wasn't just sexist, racist Russian bots downvoting their movies, but that the highly politicized social preaching that has kind of been taking over the movie industry recently just produced bad movies. They were lackluster films at best. Plus, Pedro clearly put a lot of work into this character, and I'm glad he got the payoff of being the one under the helmet. Another great thing that happened was, during a major fight scene, we get an awesome moment from Snidely Whiplash. Armed with a single blaster pistol, he walks into the battlefield and uses a keen mind to take down Avery. I wish we'd gotten to see more of this kind of main villain instead of the mustache-twirling, walking cliche of a villain we got most of the time over these 2 chapters. Moments like this make me feel like this guy is a legitimate threat to the group of heroes. Now, despite some well-deserved flack that I gave Moff Whiplash, I am intrigued by this character. He appears to be intelligent, and he has the Darksaber. For those who don't know what the Darksaber is, it was crafted by the first Mandalorian Jedi. Some interesting things happened to it, it's not important, but recently it's been handed down from one Mandalorian leader to the next. If they lean into that idea, then Moff Whiplash is a former Mandalorian, and in fact, he would have been the former leader of the Mandalorians. This would fit the cinematic concept of the main bad guy being a reflection of the main good guy. The idea that they're the same, but came down on different sides of an important moral line. It's something that Marvel is famous for doing, such as Captain America and Red Skull, Iron Man and Warmonger, Black Panther and Killmonger, Hulk and the Abomination, and that's the end of my examples. It gets a little old after a while in Marvel, but it is a great storytelling device. That's why they keep doing it. So look, that is the end of anything I have to say about these 2 chapters. You know, I had a really hard time giving this one a numerical number, to the point that I'm honestly not going to. There's a series I'm about to start doing. I say series. I had the first entry for a YouTube series called Fumbled at the 1 Yard Line, in which a TV show or movie is just great and amazing, and then right at the end, they mess it up. And it's not that the series is ruined for you. You'd watch it again, but it's not something you're going to go out of your way to watch. And I have a different show in mind to be the first entry for this, but I think The Mandalorian Season 1 definitely would fall into Fumbled at the 1 Yard Line. I think I got the feeling that they tried way too hard to shove all the plot and all the exposition into these last 2 chapters. And so we went from just a really fascinating series where, yeah, it wasn't a high-octane adventure. It was more of a methodical, going through this big kind of character arc show. It was more slow-paced, and I loved it. And then it's like they got to chapter 7 and 8, and they just said, crap, we need to throw all the plot in now. And so they did, but then they also said, you know what, we really need 8 episodes or 8 chapters, but we only have enough material for 7. So how are we gonna fill this out? So they throw in this random, 5-minute long joke between 2 stormtroopers. They throw in several more minutes of going over the flashback scenes that we've already had gone over. The things weren't as cleanly presented. They had a little more continuity errors, a little more head scratcher moments, and so they just kind of fumbled right there at the end. I think that is the only way I can describe The Mandalorian Season 1. Guys, I really hope that you have enjoyed my Mandalorian reviews. I apologize that this last one came out late. I have been having a fun time with the holidays, and now I am out in far West Texas, and living in a little man camp room is what they call them. So it's been a fun time. Sorry it's late, and until the next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.